So coming to the United States Senate, I was so pleased to be there, but the Wall Street Journal wrote an article before I got to the Senate talking about how rare it is in American history. Maybe, I think if I remember correctly, about 24 times has it ever happened that someone has ever gone directly from being a mayor of a big city to the United States Senate. And the perspective that I have coming from New Jersey, our nation's most densely populated state, having two major metropolitan areas, the Philly metropolitan area and the greater Newark metropolitan area. Some of you know it as the New York metropolitan area. But having that be such a major part of our state really has helped to inform me about policy and what works. And we're actually a nation returning to its cities, with 85% of Americans now living in cities or directly in their suburbs. And as I began to think about public policy when I was just a city council person, I began to understand that the ecosystems which make up economic development, education, that the interrelatedness of so many of the policy issues, from housing to the environment, it was critical to look at them, not necessarily even within city borders or state borders, but at these larger metropolitan areas. And it drove me to think about them as how can we make them thrive? And I pulled in thinkers from all over the region, especially when I became mayor, leaning on some public policy people at Woodrow Wilson, to all the way to a friend of mine, Michael Porter, up at Harvard, which is difficult for me as a Stanford man to say that, but leaned on the wisdom of a gentleman up at Harvard, and to look at the competitiveness of inner cities. And one of the things I learned hard as mayor, in fact, the best book I have that I never will write, was all the mistakes I made in management when I first became a mayor and suddenly was managing tens of thousands of people, a complex organization. I learned a lot very quickly, but I quickly learned when it came to management. I had a saying about my city and with my aides. I said, look, in God we trust, I'm a man of faith, but everybody else bring me data. And it became so important to me because I began to be challenged that with a lot of my political perspectives, or as a Democrat, or whatever the biases I had brought to policy, a lot of it, if I began to analyze the data, began to change my views on what was really necessary in the public policy sphere. For example, if you told me when I became a city council person, asked me about gun policy in America, I would have had a traditional, very far left view of guns. The only thing I wanted shot off in America were people's mouths. But when I started looking at the data of what was happening in my city, I began to realize that, wait a minute, law-abiding people buying guns is not the problem. In fact, every one of the shootings I had as mayor of Newark, and we had too many, one is too many, frankly, but we had hundreds and hundreds, was done by somebody who acquired a gun illegally through the underground market. And that if we were to apply resources to the problem of mass shootings in America, which there are far too many, we have carnage going on every single day. During the time I give these remarks, someone will be killed. We tend to don't care as much, it seems, with some children dying as we do others in this country. But today we'll have a Virginia Tech in America. And so understanding the data of that problem began to help me focus my public policy on those issues that were at hand. And so coming to the United States Senate, I came with the mission really to focus on areas that I knew could make a big difference in this country. And I began to look a lot of indices of competitiveness. Where did our country need to be if we were going to continue to have a globally competitive economy that included more and more of its people? And I began to have my staff pull every indice of competitiveness we can find, from OECD, keeps a lot of great data, all the way to the World Economic Forum. And the more data that I started going through, the more disheartened or discouraged I got, because I saw the trend. America was going from number one in all kind of categories to falling down further and further and further compared to our industrial peers. And where we wouldn't want to be number one, we began to grow to be the top dominant country in those indices, those measurable indices that we don't want to be number one in. And so let me give you a few examples here. The World Economic Forum ranks the U.S. Number 3 in global competitiveness. We used to be number 1, and we are falling. We rank 5th in the World Economic Forum's Innovation Index. In other words, we used to be the number 1 country for investing and being an innovative country. Now we've fallen behind countries like Switzerland and Japan. When it comes to some of the things that make up these indices, none of this will be surprising to you. We used to be the top country investing in infrastructure there was. We used to have a global infrastructure that was the envy of the globe, excuse me. And now we are gone from the country building the Hoover Dam, massive sprawling interstate highways, to now being ranked number 14 globally in the world when it comes to infrastructure. And if you look at our infrastructure debt, I always look at this, what did I inherit from my parents and grandparents? We inherited this incredible system of infrastructure. We have failed to invest in it, and now the money needed to make that infrastructure even what it was, not what it needs to be, that debt is now into the trillions of dollars. And if I sat in Congress seeing the anemic amount of money that we want to invest, it's frustrating to me. We used to be this country that invested in R&D. We were global R&D investors. The Information and Technology Innovation Foundation ranked the U.S. now last out of 40 economies assessed when it came to improvements in innovation capacity. The investments in R&D intensity relative to the rest of the world is revealing a disturbing de-emphasis in this country on innovation. We once had the most R&D intensive economy, and now studies are showing that we're about 10th behind Israel, South Korea, Finland, Sweden, Taiwan, Germany. And many economies are increasing their R&D investment relative to GDP, while we have about the same R&D investment